Hey, it's State of State. We got your Nittany Line update. It's a football discussion with Tom and Justin, so kick back and press play.
With former Penn State and NFL defensive back Justin King, I'm Tom Hannafin. This is State of State. This podcast is presented by BetOnline. BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for everything football. BetOnline is every stat, every matchup, and even live odds and spreads to bet on during the games. Think you know your stuff? Get in on BetOnline's $200,000 mega contest and pick 5 games against the spread every week for your chance at weekly prizes and a share of $200,000. When the games are over, head to the online casino and get in on a game of blackjack or poker or unwind with one of over 150 slots games. Head to betonline.ag today to get in on the action. State of State is presented by BetOnline. The game starts here. State of State is proud to partner with Illumination Brewing for another season of crafting State IPA, the perfect tailgate and game day beer for Penn State football fans. State IPA is available now at your local beer distributor, grocery store, plus select bars and restaurants. Visit illuminationbrewing.com/beer/state-IPA to learn more. Must be 21 years or older to purchase. Please drink responsibly. Also, State of State is a proud supporter of Blue White Outfitters. Blue White Outfitters was created as a retail shop meant to highlight the confidence, competitiveness, and fearlessness of the elite athletes found throughout the history of Penn State University. Check out their Lockdown U and Lawn Boys merchandise today, and keep an eye out for State of State apparel coming soon. All sales from Blue White Outfitters directly benefit Penn State student athletes. Visit www.bluewhiteoutfitters.com today. Hi, everyone, and welcome to State of State. I'm Tom Hannafin. He's Justin King. This week, Penn State hits the road for the first time since the West Virginia game, which was all the way back in August. Number 4 Penn State, undefeated at 5-0, goes to face now unranked USC, who sits at 3-2 and 1-2 overall in Big Ten play after a surprise loss at Minnesota this past weekend in what was a tumultuous weekend altogether for the top 15 in college football. We're going to dive into which version of USC is Penn State going to get this weekend in Los Angeles. Like, comment, subscribe, rate us, turn on notifications, get at us on social media at State of State Pod, get in our comment section on YouTube. We appreciate that so much. And if you haven't done so already, you can become a member of our YouTube channel for just 99 cents a month. And you get all upcoming episodes of State of State ad-free. Again, just 99 cents a month. There's a whole bank of episodes right now available for our members only since we started offering this in the summer. And if you want, you can become a member for just 99 cents. No ads. It's the greatest thing in the world. Justin, this is a game that you and I have been talking about for months in the offseason as one of the most important ones on Penn State's schedule. It's still that, but it feels very different after this past weekend. USC went on the road to Minnesota, lost by a score of 24-17. It required a last-minute drive by Minnesota to ultimately take the lead on what was a ballsy call by PJ Fleck to go for it on 4th and 1, to go for a QB sneak and score a touchdown to go ahead as opposed to kicking a field goal and giving the Trojans an opportunity to perhaps take the lead with another possession. But still, USC did not look good in this game. 3 turnovers, 2 by Miller Moss, a fumble by Woody Marks, who's an outstanding running back and had a lot of success against Minnesota. This whole thing, I'm just like, I just said it moments ago, I don't know which version of USC you're going to get. The version that beat LSU in Vegas, the version that fought it out with Michigan but still lost in Ann Arbor, and now this game in Minneapolis where it's like, what does Lincoln Riley have going on at USC right now?
Man, there's a lot of shakeup in the Big Ten, right? We looked at all the records of teams that have traveled across a couple of time zones, and they have not been successful just across the board. With that being said, I mean, I would have preferred them being ranked and everybody understand, like, you know, the stakes are high because I think they're still a talented team. Everything that we've seen previously before the upset loss, like we've seen it last week, like teams that lost last week, whether it's Alabama, USC, or whatever the case may be, they're like the players are still the players, right? And if anybody's some level of competitive to be at these programs, they're going to come back with vengeance. So I don't want to look at it any type of way going out there and looking at it since they're an unranked team. 26, right? Going across a couple time zones, playing at USC. I mean, they have athletes. So as long as you keep those things bottled up, I feel like it's still going to be a competitive matchup and we have to go out and perform and play. I mean, it's still USC.
According to BetOnline, Penn State is getting -5.5, and the over/under currently sits at 49 at the time we're recording this. Head to online.ag for the lines and spreads for this game in particular. It feels like a good matchup for Penn State, Justin, but simultaneously, I'm looking at what Penn State has done offensively and the way that USC plays defensively. Against Minnesota, Darius Taylor, the very talented running back from Minnesota, was basically the entire offense for the Golden Gophers. So in my mind, if you get Nick Singleton back healthy, and James Franklin said this week that they were expecting him to go this past Saturday, and it was kind of a game time decision that Singleton could not play against UCLA. They expect him to play, albeit on a shortened practice week. The team flies out on Thursday. The equipment truck is already making the trek across America. The hope is that, yes, Singleton is expected to play. My gut, Justin, if Drew Aller only throws the ball 15 times in this game and you just run the hell out of the ball, you're going to have a lot of success against USC. And I know there's so many Penn State fans that want to see Aller just light it up and be Peyton Manning or something like that. I'm like, I don't think you necessarily need him to do that in this game.
No, I think the recipe for victory was kind of shown, right? Like run the football and see if they can stop it. Limit their exposure to their explosive players on the outside. This is Zachariah Branch and all these different guys, special teams, make sure that thing is bottled up. But yeah, you control the game. Like that's what I was saying last week, just the fundamentals of how Penn State has been playing. It travels and it lines up well with a lot of teams as long as you can stay ahead of the down and distance, the clock, and just the scoreboard in general. Because they're built as a strong physical team. This is probably the most talent that we've seen to this point of this year, regardless of where they're ranked. And the styles make the fight. And I think stylistically, we match up well if we keep it within our frame of how we play football.
Against UCLA, Penn State had Sal Wormley back. We saw Cooper Cousins in there a fair amount. We saw how Vega Ioane was going in motion. My brain, Justin, immediately went to, well, what will Andy Kotelnicki do with this now that he's put this on tape with Vega Ioane out of the slot coming in motion to crack the end on the weak side? I don't know if you'll see it against USC, but there's part of me, I think Vega Ioane is going to get a carry at some point. What do you think?
He's a pretty athletic guy, right? I mean, seeing the
350 pounds.
Come on, man. You see that these big guys doing different stuff, even watching Monday Night Football. The guy with the interception, and he's taking off, doing backflips, but I digress. But no, I think seeing him and moving, having an offensive lineman that could move that way, and whether you hit him on the wing or you plug it, call it a little earlier, and he's like a lead ISO type of situation. When you have big bodies moving like that, the physics of it get really scary for defenders. Trust me, I played against the 49ers back in the day. It had Staley and all these different guys, and it was like, man, you talk about trying to go cow tip, and you can't really do it with like aggressive linemen like that. So that's what I would think. I think probably starting to insert them in terms of like between the tackles might come into a play and get them on the move because, again, big bodies moving that way, just the physics of it help us. And with especially Nick Singleton coming back, being able to create lanes, and we talk about him engaging with defenders later into the secondary is only beneficial to us because he has that home run ability and just the way that he is from a dasher standpoint, being able to break arm tackles and make that one cut and go. That kind of opens that up for him. And then when that happens, bring the safeties down and let's see Drew Aller do his thing,
Minnesota runs a zone rushing scheme. For the most part, they wanted to keep the game in the box, and it paid off for them. Credit to their quarterback, Brosmer. He played efficient football. I think he threw the ball maybe 16 times. He accounted for every touchdown, 3 rushing touchdowns for Minnesota, and they were opportunistic. It wasn't like he was, Vince Young or something like that. But if you protect the football in this game, you play physical along the offensive line, and you run the ball effectively the way Penn State does, you should have success against this USC defense. That being said, you and I think the world of D'Anton Lynn. I think the world thinks the world of D'Anton Lynn as the defensive coordinator for USC, former Penn State defensive back, former UCLA defensive coordinator last year. He has certainly helped improve that defense, and it could be argued if USC doesn't have 3 turnovers offensively, it could have been a completely different game for the bulk of that game. Yes, they got gashed by Darius Taylor and Major, the backup running back, but the passing game did not beat USC. What have you seen out of USC's defense and Danton Lynn that they do well?
Attack the football. I mean, you got 11 guys get into the football with bad intentions. That's not something I'm not going to say you haven't seen. Well, no, I am going to say you haven't seen from USC since the Brian
Not the
Cushing.
Grinch era.
Yeah,
my God,
like the old Pete Carroll days, right? Like it's just you haven't seen that type of aggression from from a Pac-12 defense, to be completely honest. No shade to the Pac-12, but some shade to the Pac-12. When it comes down to you know what I mean? But when it comes down to them, like just the way that they're attacking and the athletes that they have attacking on defense, I think is the key thing that you show. And you talk about a defense or a team taking on the traits of a coach. I mean, you see that mentality come from Dan, or just since he's been at USC, and that change in how they've been attacking the football, blitzing, and being aggressive from that standpoint. And yeah, I would say not super exotic, but enough blitzes and different things of that nature to where they create opportunities and cause havoc. So that's a different wrinkle when you talk about playing a USC team, just historically from watching.
This is a very difficult thing to address because it's something that has been symptomatic with Penn State's offense for the 5 games they've played thus far, is slow starts offensively. And James Franklin was asked about it earlier this week and said, like most programs in college football, in most levels of football, we script out the first 2 to 3 drives, and then you make adjustments as you go. Sometimes after the first drive or the second drive, you're like, screw it, we're going to start making changes right now. How does Penn State fix the slow starts?
I mean, that's like a science question, man. It's like or like psychology question, right? I think to fix this, I'm not sure how you fix the slow starts.
It's not a lack of talent, and it's not
not at all.
Nicky writing a bad script. Is it more you're probing in those first few drives as opposed to attacking? We talked about that last year.
Just historically, right? Even when they won the Big Ten championship in 2017, like that, they were known as a second half team. Like even back then, I think just historically throughout the process, it's kind of been a ramp up type of situation where I don't remember a time where we just jumped on people except for when Saquon was there, right? We talk about explosive plays and things of that nature. But outside of that, it's always kind of been, let's figure out our footing. How are we attacking it? And then going after it. Not to compare it to always the boxing, but like watch Floyd Mayweather's fights, right? It's like, okay, what are we doing? What do we got? Okay, here's the opening. Let's hit that. Pop, 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 and go from there. So I think that's, like you said, more of a fill out type of situation, whether it's more base defenses, more conservative plays on offense to see how they're going to play different things, and then attacking from the counters or whatever they're giving you from that standpoint. But is that a reason to start slow? I don't think so.
The thing that I hold on to, I was listening to the Cover 3 podcast. Tom Fornelli on there does an outstanding job. And he was talking about Ohio State this season and the Georgia offense of years past. I wouldn't necessarily compare it to this year, but he was talking about this year's Ohio State team, especially against Iowa. They thumped Iowa, but they really started steamrolling Iowa in the second half there in Columbus. And Fornelli was saying about Ohio State and past Georgia teams that they didn't necessarily jump on you early, but they tightened the noose as the game went on. And it was probing. It was trying to see, it's like, what are they going to throw at me? What are some weaknesses? You're just kind of feeling them out. And then as the game goes on, you just smother your opponent. Penn State, I wouldn't necessarily put them on that level. Georgia's arguably the best team of the last 5 years. Ohio State is arguably the best team in college football right now. So I'm not putting them on that pedestal. But the way Penn State has played this season, if you can maintain that first half is even or just an incremental lead, and then you suffocate the other team in the second half, it works. It's going to get you a win. And to that point, Penn State has allowed less than 100 total yards in the third quarter on defense to opposing offenses through 5 games. One of the dumbest, most incredible stats I think I've ever heard in recent memory with Penn State's defense. And we were talking about, this could be a down year for the defense.
I mean, again, it goes back to what we were talking about last week, or exciting football versus good football, right? Like sometimes they don't always go hand in hand. And you're completely right. those former, I mean, Alabama teams, just say national championship teams,
Yeah.
a lot of them operated that way, where it was just like, yo, we get a little bit, it's like close, and then third quarter, start pounding, or like you said, like an anaconda or a python, you just kind of start squeezing the life out of your opponent. I mean, when we played and had success, I remember playing Tennessee in the Outback Bowl, going blast from the past. But there's a confidence when you start seeing you wear down a team and them start to quit. And then it kind of becomes an onslaught. But when that's a mentality, right? And it's a way that you call the game. It's a way that your players are built. And again, those are the teams that you see having success later into the season.
You always talk about Jimmys and Joes versus X's and O's. Would you say that the teams that jump out in the first and second quarter and then kind of falter in the second half, is that more indicative of you have the Jimmys and Joes, but you don't have the X's and O's?
Sure. Adjustments are a critical thing in football, especially halftime adjustments, how people come out, how they think they're going to play, talk about flavor of the week. And if you can make adjustments at halftime or make slight tweaks to expose what your opponent is doing, that's where the X's and O's come from, right? But at the end of the day, like sometimes when you jump out on teams like player A is better than player B, and we can get an explosive, or if we just got an edge or different things of that nature. But I definitely feel like when you have incremental changes for the positive in the second half and the negative in the second half is more indicative of the coaching.
This episode of State of State is presented in part by Melin. Now, for those of you who've been watching this podcast for quite some time, you know that Justin and I are both big hat guys. Now, when I was introduced to Melin, I immediately saw how durable and comfortable their hats are. Great color options, great sizing options as well. For me, someone who likes to go to a lot of different football games and tailgates throughout the year, I need a hat that's going to be flexible depending on the weather. If it's hot out, I want something that's breathable, and that's something that Melin hats provide. And also, if it's inclement weather that's going to be nasty out, then I need a hat that's not going to lose its shape if you get them wet. In fact, if you need to wash a Melin hat, they come right back to life and they look brand new if you throw them in the wash. So that's something I absolutely love. So if you're looking for a hat as tough as you, check out Melin. You won't wear anything else after you get one for yourself. If you're looking for the world's most durable hat, look no further. Go to melin.com. That's MELIN.com and put it to the test yourself. This podcast is brought to you in part by Cheribundi. Cheribundi is a recovery product that's in the locker room for the Penn State Nittany Lions football program, and we are so proud to have them as a sponsor to get the message out there to help you with your fitness, your performance, and your recovery. Tart cherries are the highest antioxidant fruit or vegetable in the world. They're a natural anti-inflammatory with incredible benefits such as reduced soreness, increased recovery, contains naturally occurring melatonin to help improve your sleep and also help support your immunity. Cheribundi is used by nearly 500 collegiate and professional sports teams, including Penn State. That's 66 out of 67 Power 4 conference football teams, plus every NCAA football and basketball national champion since 2007. Goes deeper than that. In the National Football League, 10 of the last 11 Super Bowl champions have used Cheribundi. Every team playing in Europe or Brazil this season had Cheribundi with them. You can check out Cheribundi right now at cheribundi.com or Amazon. Flipping to USC's offense versus Penn State's defense. USC offensively is 20th in the country in passing yards per game, roughly 300 yards. They're 78th in rushing. However, as I just said earlier on, Woody Marks had, I believe, 140 yards rushing against Minnesota. Now, is Minnesota the best defense in the Big Ten? Far from it, but still, for USC to have that success and that commitment to running the football is significant. The issue is they're putting a lot of their games on Miller Moss. And the last handful of games, it's been a little rough for him in that, taking a look at his game log here, 38 attempts against Minnesota, 45 against Wisconsin, 51 in the loss to Michigan, 30 against Utah State, 36 against LSU. We understand that this is a pass-happy system because it's Lincoln Riley, and we've seen what he's done at USC and Oklahoma in the past. The issue for them, and it's eerily similar to Penn State's offensive line, is that USC's offensive line, solid in the interior, some question marks at tackle. And this USC offensive line got abused by Minnesota's pass rush. And by no means is anybody looking at Minnesota's pass rush and saying, man, they're loaded with elite alpha players that are getting after the passer, first round, second round picks. I wouldn't necessarily say this was Minnesota being just that much better in terms of personnel. USC really struggled in this department. Do you feel like if Penn State puts the game on Miller Moss, they can win?
Sure. Yeah, when it comes down to, I believe so. I mean, he's been, like you said, a little inconsistent, but they have players around that can make plays. I think it comes down to, again, stopping the run. And let's say with lockdown, you kind of shows up. I think this is going to be a game where more skill is going to be presented from both sides of the football. And from there, it got back to the fundamentals. I hate to be boring about it, but like that's just what it is.
We talked about Penn State is flying out on Thursday to get themselves ready for the game on Saturday. It's a 3:30 p.m. Eastern kick on CBS, so it'll feel like noon for those guys. Penn State's doing the right things, but it is a condensed work week in terms of what you're able to do from a practice standpoint. You're getting in there Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and then you're out. You always talk about just in life prioritizing sleep, and doing something on the road is just very, very challenging. In your experience, whether it's the pro level or even the college level, how do you manage these road trips?
Man, NFL West Coast trips were a little different because we got out there a couple of days in advance. The timing seemed to work out. I always remember college games were tougher just traveling time zones. I don't know if it was just the schedule of school. Like I remember thinking like playing at Minnesota and like just an hour earlier. And then it was like a 12 o'clock game. I just remember wake ups were like 6 o'clock in the morning. They kind of throw you off, have to drink coffee when you didn't really drink coffee back then. But NFL wasn't too bad. For some reason, college was a little tougher because you're just not used to that adjustment. I mean, in NFL, you're used to kind of going back and forth from time zones. So you kind of prepare, got some different cocktails to get you amped up and all those different things, but
not like actual cocktails, like different cocktails.
But like, yeah, I'm talking cocktails of, like
not Marshawn Lynch pregame cocktails.
No, not those type of cocktails. Like stuff back in the medical equipment room where, sniffing salts and all the different stuff. But college, I felt like college was a lot more difficult. I mean, even if it was just one or two time zones. And I don't know if it's because the preparation or like how much we changed the schedule and adjusted for how we had to do things wasn't the same. But I remember that being like, okay, got to get up. Like on the program, you have to smash your head against the wall to like really wake up in college. But NFL was pretty straightforward.
This road trip is significant. You head to USC, you have this game, you get a bye week, you get another bye week, then you're at Wisconsin, and then you host Ohio State on November 2nd. So you're really into the meat of this Big Ten schedule as of this weekend. Penn State has a lot that they can gain from this. I understand USC dropped from 11 to now, what did you say was 26, or at least unranked, but like sniffing the top 25. It's still USC. It's still Lincoln Riley. Miller Moss is a very capable quarterback, as we've seen throughout this season and last year in the Holiday Bowl. The weapons you talked about, Woody Marks, Zachariah Branch, Deuce Robinson, they have some dudes offensively. Now, if Penn State's able to create that pass rush, and you've got guys like Zane Durant, Denai Dennis Sutton, Abdul Carter, everybody getting involved, you feel very, very confident about pressuring Moss, pressuring passes. You will have to bottle up the run game, so that's going to put some pressure on the interior of the defensive line for Penn State. Penn State's depth at linebacker is something that's been questioned, but James Franklin said he's been very pleased with that depth, and you've gotten back guys like Dom DeLuca to help bolster that group. One thing that was raised earlier on this week, and we're still kind of seeing how this defense moves forward without KJ Winston, who is out, quote, long-term, according to James Franklin. You've seen how Jalen Reed opened the season playing that lion position and had to get away from it for a few games because of the absence of Winston. Day Lane has stepped up at safety, and you've seen guys step up at linebacker. So James Franklin said earlier on this week that it's helped Reed get back to that lion position. Can you articulate what that lion position is within Tom Allen's defense?
I mean, I think you talk about that hybrid safety, right, where you're kind of roaming around, and it's a key defender because they're making, like, when you do make checks and you can rock and roll, it's essentially the playmaker on the back end, like a little bit of the quarterback. So when it comes down to those situations, I mean, I don't know Tom Allen's defense specifically, but when you think of those, like those rover positions, those safety hybrid type of spots, they become really critical in covering, the middle of the field and those X factor type of players that quarterbacks lean on. Run game, you have to fill, A/B gaps and things of that nature. So it's a very dynamic position in terms of responsibility that person has to cover, and sometimes doesn't get all the accolades or the big plays. But when that person isn't there, almost like we talked about Day Hardy last year, those 18-yard catches or runs that are 12 yards and someone's not showing up, is typically that position that's responsible for it.
As we are looking forward to this game, one of the big topics of conversation earlier on this week from James Franklin's press conference, and now it's all over Penn State football social media, is the size of the runway at the State College Airport. And you and I were talking about this before we came on. Beloved SCE, the State College Airport, which I was so glad to hear this brought up because, yes, there is the element for those that didn't hear this. Penn State is going to have to bus to the Harrisburg Airport to then fly to Los Angeles. And the point was raised by James Franklin is that simply the runway at the State College Airport is not big enough because it doesn't support a large enough plane and fuel tank, all those things to accommodate for what Penn State needs to put on an aircraft to then fly somewhere. And this was a point that he raised, that there's a good amount of schools within the Big Ten that don't have the same issues. And at the same time, there's plenty of schools that actually have this issue. So it's all about this infrastructure of college football that you and I love to dive into. And I want to stress this for Penn State football fans, is that if you look back on everything James Franklin has had to tackle from an infrastructure standpoint with rebuilding this program, if you'd have guessed that by 2024, you'd hear him lobbying for the State College Airport to have upgrades and a bigger runway, all these things, I don't know if a logical person would have come to that determination necessarily. I think a lot of people would love to see it open up because this fan would love to fly in the morning and fly out in the evening. How great would that be to go to a football game? There's a little commerce for you. But still, it's amazing, all the little things of just like training table in the facility to, hey, we need a bigger runway so that for these guys to comfortably get from one point to another without hectic travel now within this Big Ten. It freaking matters. And it matters on the field. It matters when it comes to wins and losses. And you think about all the things James Franklin and this staff have had to figure out, from the sanctions to renovating Beaver Stadium to renovating Haluba and Lash. It's freaking mind-boggling. And you saw it firsthand there, kind of in the middle of this stretch.
I think it's really important. I think it expedites the process when you think of the Big Ten reorganizing and you're playing games. I always thought it was an issue. I mean, from being like a recruiting coordinator and working and getting coaches to games and moving around, I thought it was a disadvantage from the recruiting standpoint because coaches had to, catch 2 flights to go see a player, or you have to drive 3 hours to a major airport to get somewhere. And, other schools might use, like, that we're competing against, or just jumping on private planes and just going straight to a game and straight back. And a lot of times at Penn State, that wasn't the case unless you were traveling with the head coach or had to go somewhere else because of that same issue out of the Penn State airport. So even when we talk about the talent acquisition and seeing guys live throughout the season, makes it really hard and limited for all the coaches to get around, let alone the team getting to a game. I think that's obvious, right? Once we see that, it's like, okay, we're messing with the product in the sense of these guys got to drive 2 hours, hop on a plane, then go there. Cause we used to have to do that for every bowl game, right? We have to drive to Harrisburg, load up, and it was just like, man, this is a pain. But other schools, it's different when you can just jump on 10 minutes away from the facility, land, and you go there because you're already at a disadvantage from traveling to begin with. I'm more so thinking about the recruiting and talent acquisition part of it and the coaches moving around. And I think that's really what it comes into, where if Penn State can get to major hub cities that they're recruiting in one flight, or have access to private planes to get to where they need to get to from the talent acquisition, and make sure that we're making the right investments and the assets that we're bringing into the program from that, I think there's a lot of gaps that need to be filled. And yeah, that's when we're getting into the politics of the situation and all that other stuff, that murky area. But it's needed for Penn State to want to compete at the level when you're competing against teams that don't have those hurdles, right? Regardless of what you're talking about, the margin of victory being very slim, and every opportunity to close those gaps you need to take advantage of.
If you're looking for a breakdown of the airport situation for all Big Ten football schools, go to @StuffSummers, SOMERS, says Darian Summers on X. He has a hilariously accurate breakdown of all the airports for every Big Ten team. It reads like a Barstool Sports description of teams in the NFL. It's hilarious, but it's also very informative, and you understand just what Penn State would need to do to SCE to open that up. And James Franklin said, like, this would be good for the community, for the university. I know a lot of people are like, oh, well, this is just for football. Listen, the university is the town. The football team is mostly the university when it comes to a business standpoint. So it makes a ton of sense. And I was just saying, as a fan, would I rather pay $1,000 for a mandatory 2-night hotel stay anywhere in the greater State College area? Or would I rather fly in the morning from wherever I'm able to fly in from, attend the game, which the fields are right around the corner, largely from where the airport is. You improve public transportation to make that a better option for college football fans. You go to the game, you go back to the airport, you go home. I mean, and on top of that, if you're trying to expand which students are able to come to your university, Penn State already has a global footprint. So that's not really a problem. But wouldn't it be nice if the State College Airport was bigger to accommodate kids flying in directly from name a city on the continent in the world?
It correlates to recruiting. We talk about being able to land players out of Detroit. Like, that's a sale. Like, hey, mom, dad, you could just hop on a flight. It's an hour and a half here, hour and a half back. Or it used to be flights to Atlanta. I'm not sure of the different flight schedules, but I know they took that off, and it made it harder for us to recruit the Atlanta area or even the Florida area, because I mean, you got to take 2 different flights and then drive from Harrisburg, or take it's a hard sell for people that are coming to support their kids. So even when you think of the recruiting standpoint, there's just so many nuances within travel that make Penn State a hard location to get to where you have to limit the funnel or the net that you're casting out in terms of talent. So I think it's definitely needed from the business affairs, from the university, even just making it more of an attractive location to get to. I mean, scouts always talk to me about how they hate coming to Penn State. And you don't want the scouts coming to look at Penn State in a bad mood because it's hard to get there, right? You want it to be easy, smooth, so we can just kind of evaluate the player. So I think there's a lot of ripples that happen to bad transportation or making it hard to get to Penn State.
I think about the amount of recruits Penn State has gotten from Canada. Now you're dealing with an international aspect of this whole thing. It's
for sure.
Everything adds up is what I'm saying. I'm not making apologies for the good and the bad of Penn State football for the last 10 years. I know a lot of people, James Franklin's performance can be polarizing. 4 5-0 starts for the last 4 years. And then also over the last 4 years after those 5-0 starts, the State has finished 13-11. So it's like everybody's saying, great. We keep talking about things that need to improve. Yes, these things do need to improve all together for the Penn State football team, for the Penn State ecosystem to take steps forward to be competitive, to win those games that Penn State has not won under James Franklin. He understands that. We understand that. We're in support of all these changes, because if you want Penn State football to be successful, you have to keep up with the juggernauts of this sport, because it looks really positive right now that Penn State, if you clear USC, you get a bye week, you're feeling great at 6-0, potentially. We'll see where you are in the rankings. But look at what just happened to everybody else this past weekend. Who was guessing Alabama was going to get knocked off by freaking Vanderbilt in Nashville? The parody.
They did.
They did. Jacob Tapia believed it.
Yeah, I didn't see that clip until after. I was like, oh, that's pretty great right there.
It was great.
Alabama, you're next.
That's the level of parity that Penn State is dealing with in college football. It's either keep up or fall behind. So these little things, they're not so little, changing a runway in an airport, but still, these little things matter if you want to win and win championships in college football. And especially, I saw a story before we came on here, Justin, of, I think it was something, a bunch of ex-Disney executives are potentially talking about a 70-team league within college football. I don't know if there's any truth to that or not, but
I believe
there's changes coming.
You say Disney?
Ex-Disney executives, something like that.
Yeah, the ESPNs, ESPN guys. I mean, 100%. I believe it. Yeah.
We'll see. Penn State versus USC this Saturday in Los Angeles. Penn State at number 4, undefeated, is on the road against Lincoln Riley's Trojans. The line is 5.5 right now in favor of Penn State. The over-under is 49. Again, head to betonline.ag for more information as those evolve throughout the week. Like, comment, subscribe, rate us, turn on notifications, get at us on social media at State of State Pod. Get in our comment section on YouTube. And if you haven't done so already, you can become a member of our YouTube channel for just 99 cents a month and get all upcoming episodes of State of State ad-free. Thank you all so much for joining us. Enjoy Penn State versus USC this Saturday, 3:30 p.m. Eastern on CBS. Thank you all so much for joining us. This episode and our entire library of shows is available now on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and wherever else you get your podcasts. Also, let us know what you think of the show on social media and check out all of our content on X, Instagram, and TikTok. Search for the handle at State of State Pod. State of State is presented by Bet Online and by Blue White Outfitters.